How's it going, everybody? I'm glad that expectations have been set that this talk is going to tell you everything you need to know to launch a mobile app. So we'll be sure to deliver on that. All right. My name is Matt Schraan. I lead product management at Livefront, and co-presenting with me today is Jack. Jack, you want to say hi?
Hi, morning, everybody. My name's Jack Cunningham, also from Livefront, and I'm a product strategist on the team.
All right. If you're not familiar, Livefront is a digital product studio. We're based right here in Minneapolis, and our team helps design, develop, launch, grow, scale digital products. So primarily, our focus is on mobile apps, but we also build for other platforms as well, TV, voice, web, etc. The structure of our talk today is going to take the form of 7 lessons that we've learned through the years in launching many mobile apps. Some of these lessons are more abstracted and generalized to just digital product management in general, and some of them are more nuanced to mobile. These 7 lessons are fairly expansive, so we'll cover a lot of ground. We're going to try to move through this really fast, but there's just so much to dive into. And so what we're hoping from this is, while this isn't the exhaustive list of every last thing you need to know, but these are 7 really key important lessons or things to keep top of mind as you're going about this journey of bringing a new mobile app into the world. The first lesson is draft a quarterback that you trust. I'm going to try really hard to minimize the bad football analogies, but I do really think that quarterback is an apt analogy for a product manager, where a product manager doesn't have direct authority over the team, much like a quarterback does, but the very best product managers are thought of as leaders. And really, at the end of the day, what they're ultimately responsible for is creating an atmosphere where they get the best out of their individual team members and really facilitate better outcomes. When talking about launching a digital product, it wasn't that long ago that the prevailing wisdom was, okay, we're going to need a really detailed project plan with key milestones and risks and deliverables and a Gantt chart, and really thinking of it as a project that has a start and an end. And we've really evolved beyond that into more of a product-based approach. And it's a little bit of a different skill set to be successful, where a project manager is primarily concerned with managing risk against the project of the deliverable of the project itself. But when you're bringing a mobile app to market, your biggest risk isn't the timeline, it isn't the deliverable. It's really, is what we're fixing to build, is that valuable to people? Like, is it actually gonna have an impact? And a product manager's skill set are really intended to manage against that risk. I really love this quote. It's from Deep Nishar, who previously led product at LinkedIn, and it's, "A great product manager has the brain of an engineer, the heart of a designer, and the speech of a diplomat." And this isn't to say that product managers are these superhuman mutants that have all these skills. But what it does say is that product managers, the really good ones, have a respect for these different disciplines and understand what it takes to create an atmosphere where these different concerns work cohesively together towards a common goal. Okay, so let's dig in. What are the habits of a great product manager, and what are the traits that really chart a successful mobile app launch? The first one is leaving the building and going to get coffee. What this really means, this analogy is also a little bit tortured because not many of us actually work in buildings anymore. But what really this means is taking an external view. A lot of times products are launched with a really intense internal focus. And so part of the role of a product manager is to bring that external focus into the room and actually talking to end users or talking to customers. especially in the case of when you're bringing a mobile app to market, and let's say your organization has never dipped its toes into mobile before, and this is your first foray. To really do it well requires deep expertise of these mobile platforms. And that's another way of looking outside the building, is really knowing what direction are these mobile apps or these mobile platforms heading in, and how can we plan our app to align to that. The next lesson is they place informed bets. And so, like I mentioned before, when you're bringing a new mobile app to market, your primary source of risk is not, scalability or deliverable. It's value risk, as Marty Kagan would put it. It's, does this thing actually make people's lives better? Is it useful for it? And you might have really well-formed theories that it is, but it hasn't yet been proven. And so a strong product manager is able to systematically break down that risk at every step of the way and place small bets. So in the design phase, validating the concept, validating the desirability of it, prototyping, evaluating the usability of your mobile app. It's really easy to get usability wrong on the mobile form factor. And so putting a lot of emphasis on usability testing. And then when you actually have working software that's built, putting it in people's hands often and allowing for those feedback loops with alpha release, closed beta release, open beta release. And Jack is going to talk in more detail about what some of those techniques are later on in the talk. Then the last one is great product managers lead and serve the team. Some of you have probably heard the metaphor of the product manager is the CEO of the product. And we can probably quibble about the merits of that comparison. But in that, a CEO is charged with kind of balancing the concerns of the organization. In a lot of ways, the product manager balances the concerns of the product and the members of the product team. A great product manager takes that really seriously, and having someone with that high emotional IQ, knowing what the team needs in order to do their very best work. Great product managers have a lot of empathy. There's a lot out there about having user empathy, and that's certainly important, but it's also about having empathy for the team members on the product and making sure that people have the space and context that they need in order to do their very best work. And then lastly, it's about communication, especially when your organization is launching its very first mobile product. There's a lot of complex things that are going to need to be conveyed and explained to the rest of the organization so that expectations are properly aligned, and it takes a really skillful communicator to do that. And in our experience, that's often best served by the product manager. Okay, so put all together, what does great quarterbacking look like? Sorry. I don't know how this got in here.
They eventually end.
Yeah. Okay. So one kind of outward signal that you can look at, like a window into how well a mobile product team is functioning, is look at their public listing page in the App Store. So here, this is the public listing page of the Slack iOS app. And you can tell a lot by what you see on this. And obviously, this isn't fair. This is just me looking through an outward kind of window. But I think you can really infer a lot about how well a team functions and how effective its product management is by looking at this. So pulling out a couple things here, one thing that we see is really predictable weekly releases. So you can see here that they're shipping a public release every single week. If we go backwards in time, they've shipped 25 public releases just in the year 2022. If we actually look what's inside these releases, we've got new features that are coming out on this really regular cadence. We also have kind of something in between where we have extensions or enhancements of existing features, often in tune with user pain points and really showing a lot of empathy in the work that gets prioritized and released on a regular basis. And then finally, bug fixes, a commitment to quality. And we'll talk more about roadmaps and things, but when you have a really intense fixation on features, that comes at the opportunity cost often of pulling up the floor and really lifting the quality of your app. And so it's great to see when a product team has a commitment to, yeah, we're gonna develop new features, but we're also gonna button up the feature set that we already have. Okay, by contrast, this is another messaging iOS app. I'm not going to name names, but we can see some contrasts here. So the first thing that jumps out is really irregular releases. So there's not really a predictable cadence or rhythm. Sometimes you see no releases for months at a time. Sometimes you see multiple releases within a week of each other. Maybe that's a bug fix that was, had to be a hot fix to just get out there. Also, if you just look at what's in these releases, you can't really see, like, what is a stability improvement? And again, maybe these are packed with features, but it's just, we don't know. And so it's both the execution, but the communication as well. That really marks a high-functioning product team and a high-functioning product manager. Okay, so that's lesson 1. Draft a quarterback you trust. Find a really strong product manager to lead the effort. Lesson 2, relentlessly ask yourself, why should this product exist? This can be an uncomfortable question. This can be a question that a lot of organizations look past, but it is essential. And so, why should we build a mobile app? There's lots of great reasons to build a mobile app, some of which include, hey, we have mobile-specific use cases. We want to reach users in our physical stores. Maybe your customers are asking for a mobile app, or maybe you've done your own research and shown that your target consumer just has the expectation that they want to consume your services on a mobile form factor. Maybe you have evidence to suggest that you can capture more business or more sales through a mobile channel. Maybe your use case just requires native mobile capabilities. Maybe you need a really tight camera integration. Maybe you need precise location. These devices are pretty powerful, and they afford us a lot of opportunities that are unique to mobile. There's also a lot of research that users interact with digital properties on a mobile device more frequently. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to extend our brand experience and create more loyalty by a higher frequency of interaction. All of these are great reasons to build a mobile app. And in your case, you're going to have to evaluate how these stack up. Let's look at some anti-patterns, reasons that you may not want to build a mobile app. One is just, hey, well, everyone else has one, so we should have one too. That might be relevant. A competitive force is certainly nothing to ignore, but just because someone else in your space has a mobile app doesn't necessarily mean you need to have one too. Sometimes people get really enamored with the capabilities of mobile apps, and specifically like push notifications. If you want to have a marketing campaign, that's awesome, but a mobile app is a very, very expensive marketing campaign, just so you know. Thirdly, our CEO thinks mobile apps are cool. We love it when CEOs think mobile apps are cool, don't get me wrong, but that isn't the sole reason why you should build one. So really, you're trying to answer, why does the world need this mobile app? And we found that a really kind of systematic approach for breaking down that question, first, like we alluded to before and we'll talk about later, is just looking outward, getting that outside perspective and knowing where consumer expectations are and what they need and how a mobile app may serve those needs. Looking inward, knowing what's relevant to our business, what really moves the needle in terms of the business outcomes that we're trying to drive, and then doing synthesis and analysis, and then from the output of that is forming a vision, an aspiration. What could this mobile app be? Not just in 6 months, but in 6 years. And then the strategy, the tactics, the themes that are going to get us from here to there. So one framework that we've found that's really beneficial with bringing new mobile apps to market is the North Star framework. And so it's really all about finding and getting a well-formed, clear picture of what creates value for users, then also knowing what creates value for our business, and then finding those overlapping areas. And then within that is oftentimes where your North Star is. Ideally, this is measurable in a metric. A single measurement that really encapsulates why the world needs this product and how we can evaluate how well we're fulfilling that vision. And so a North Star metric should be a few things. One, it should be finite. It should chart the really specific, tangible moment or action where your mobile app fulfills on its promises to the world? What is that kind of essential aha moment where this app delivers value for users, and then how do we measure that? It should be predictive of business success, where there's a lot of fixation, understandably so, on revenue. Revenue's great, nothing against it. But it's a lagging indicator. What we're looking for is a leading indicator. What are the things that predict revenue, and how do we maximize those? It should be representative. There's also a lot of fixation on vanity metrics, App Store ratings, number of downloads, MAU. All those are great as well, and can index the success that you may be having with your mobile app. But your North Star metric should be more tailored. It should be more custom to your specific application and what it promises to deliver users. So a lot of times the best North Star metrics are really detailed. If we just kind of step back, so what does this North Star metric help us do? The first thing is it really provides a lot of clarity and alignment. How often have you kind of sat, if it's not a mobile app, just any kind of digital product endeavor, and just had to step back from the canvas and say, what are we doing? Why are we trying to do this? The North Star brings clarity to that question. It's also a really effective communication tool, where when you're building a mobile app, and if your organization has never built one before, there's a lot of jargon that people who aren't close to the work will tend to tune out. But putting the app's reason for being in terms that they can understand really is effective in communicating progress across the rest of your company. It also is a really strong accountability mechanism. The best product teams, the best product managers want to be evaluated on outcomes and not outputs. And so this is oriented to the outcome. It's not, hey, we're 80% complete on this project. It's, hey, we moved the needle on our key metric by 5% based on this A/B experiment we ran last quarter. Those are the types of milestones that we're trying to reach for with a mobile app. So if we just look at an example, just maybe to help you get your head around this, if we just hypothetically, for the Spotify app, if we said that their North Star was maximizing time spent listening to music. Other examples might be, Facebook, time spent, doom scrolling. Amazon, maximizing purchases off a Prime subscription. And there's a lot of ways to get there, right? It starts out kind of fuzzy, kind of nebulous. Okay, like maximizing time spent listening to music. How do we get there? So taking that kind of starting with that what success looks like, and then working backwards. So we know we're going to have to reach a lot of users. So we need to consider breadth, depth. The users that we have, we want them to spend more time listening to music in our app. Frequency, we want to form habits so that people build usage of our app into the normal rhythms of their day. And then efficiency, when they're in our app, they're there to listen to music, not search for music. So how do we maximize that? And so from each of those dimensions, you can then define these KPIs or key metrics, number of users or different acquisition measurements, duration of listening time, time spent in-app per user, number of sessions per week, number of time once they're in the app, what percentage of the time is spent actually listening. All these metrics roll up to that North Star of time spent listening to music. And then so from within these metrics, there's a lot of different ways or a lot of different features that we can go about to get there. But the key to it is by starting with the end goal and then working backwards on the how. Starting with the why and then being flexible on the how is really, in our view, what the value of this North Star framework really provides. Okay, that's lesson number 2. Lesson number 3. And this really fits hand in hand with the previous North Star topic, but emphasizing themes over features. So when you're going to build a new mobile app, at some point, you're going to have to sit down in a meeting, or maybe many, many meetings, and decide and determine what should our MVP feature set be. There's a lot of great ways to evaluate that. For instance, hey, user interviews are revealing X as an unmet need in the users we talk to. We ran a Kano survey, and it showed a lot of intensity around Y. Our analytics that we already have are consistently indicating a disproportionate usage of Z on mobile web. Or maybe we've done some prototyping, and we found in our prototyping exercise that users had a lot of success performing this or that function with our proto. All of these are great reasons to include a feature in your MVP. Some bad reasons. Oftentimes, there's a tendency to just assume you need web and mobile parity. Just because your website has a given feature doesn't mean your mobile app should have it as well. Really think about what's the context for when a user is going to pick up their phone, what's the context for when they're going to be at their desktop, and what use cases are more amenable to that. Second, our internal stack ranking says we should build Y. So just because you spent 3 hours in a room stack ranking your feature list doesn't mean that means anything to users at all. And then again, hitting on the marketing point. Hey, like our marketing team wants to launch this thing next month, so we need to make a bunch of bad decisions in order to like hit that timeline. It should be the other way around. Let's start with what's valuable to users, not what's valuable inside the building. So really, there's a lot about a feature roadmap, and I think there's actually a talk later today about roadmaps, which I can't wait to attend. But we've seen a lot of success in kind of evolving the idea of a feature roadmap into a roadmap of themes. And what does that mean exactly? So you think about a theme is just a layer up from a feature. It's a strategic direction or imperative. It encapsulates maybe a set of features. So going back to the Spotify example, maybe our theme is, hey, we want to minimize time that people are in our app but not listening to music, right? So that's a theme. There's a lot of features that can move that theme forward, but it's flexible as to the how we do that. Features are more the how. It's the solution, the aspect of a feature or the aspect of an app that yields a functional benefit. And then beneath that are the dev stories, the actual implementation work that's needed in order to achieve these features. So what are the advantages of taking a theme-based approach when you determine your MVP feature set? The first one is that it's oriented to those outcomes, right? It's really opinionated about what and why what we're trying to achieve and why, but it's very flexible on how we might achieve that. A lot of times, the best products are built off of experimentation and A/B testing and other forms of experiments. And so if you know what the end goal is and you have the flexibility as to like what path you're going to take to get there, that's much more amenable to really creating a culture of experimentation and maximizing those learnings and taking this skeptical approach and finding what works and what doesn't, and let's lean into what works before we pre-bake a 6-month or 12-month feature roadmap. Secondly, it builds alignment. Going back to the communication point, if you tell your CEO, hey, next month we're implementing sign-in with Apple, okay, cool. Why? Well, maybe we're trying to make it so our registration flow in our app is you can move through it in 2 taps, right? Well, in terms of a theme of, hey, our theme is minimizing, time spent in the registration flow. Well, there's lots of different ways, lots of different features that you can achieve that. And if you can show progress against that theme, it's just a much easier way to communicate, particularly like with executive stakeholders, than just saying, hey, we're building feature X or Y, and then the lowest common denominator is, well, is it done or not? Third, it forces you to define what really matters. It's a built-in prioritization mechanism. Everyone is going to have their pet feature idea, particularly with mobile. And so if you've already made a statement about what's important and someone comes to the table with their pet feature, you can then evaluate and say, okay, well, does that contribute to this theme or this outcome that we're trying to achieve? Okay, lesson 3, emphasize themes over features. Jack is going to share a little bit more.
Grab that guy.
Oh, yeah, that's what you...
I can do 2 mics too, up to you. So hi, we're gonna move on to lesson 4 here, and with this lesson, we really want to talk about when it comes to technical debt, practice frugality. So the product folks in the room, there will come a time where your back is against a wall with like a looming product release deadline staring you straight in the eyes, and you're going to run into questions or statements like this. You're going to be encouraged to incur technical debt to hit that deadline. Do what you can. We're launching on this date, and really what they're asking for you to do is to take value now with the acceptance of paying it back later on into the future. And while people think about this and kind of get scared of the word like what is technical debt, it's really similar to something else, the notion of financial debt. You're getting value today, you're paying it back later on and likely and then some. So really what's important to us when we think about this is that there's time and place for acceptance of debt. And it's really important to think about, am I clear-eyed about what promise I'm entering into? And am I principled about how I'm going to pay back that debt into the future? And the future is so hard to predict, especially within digital, that we find it really difficult to be overly willing to accept that technical debt. So again, think about financial debt and technical debt as one and of the same. Some of the things that we do is really spend time talking about and thinking about the hidden costs of technical debt. And we'll go through a few of those here. And the first being that, that hidden cost, that technical debt inhibits your ability to respond. So let's think about for a moment, everyone in this room, you're about to go launch your first mobile product. You're really excited. It hits the market, and you're hopefully flooded with people who love your app, and it just hits the mark. But more importantly, I hope for all of you that you're also hearing criticisms, feedback about what was missing, what they hoped was there, and really what they want to see in your next release. Now, if you spent time to get to that 1.0, that initial product launch, and you accrued technical debt, instead of focusing on those extremely high-value things you're hearing directly from your users that will excite them and keep them engaged and start to build loyalty, you're going to be spending weeks, maybe months, working on fixing those corners that you cut in pursuit of that product launch. The second hidden cost is that technical debt inhibits your flexibility. So let's think about it. Again, we launch our product. We accrued some technical debt, but it's OK. Our engineering team, they know heavily or deeply the intricacies that they introduced to their code base. And they're cool with it. Like, they can work around it. We know what we're going to do to fix it in the future. But then something else happens. The priorities in your organization change, and you need to move someone from your team for a small bit of time over to another to help out and fulfill on that competing priority. Or maybe one of the engineers in your team who are deeply invested and understand those intricacies decide to leave and take another career opportunity. You're going to be left in a situation where you need to backfill or onboard or offboard, and those tasks become extremely difficult when you've accrued technical debt within your projects. Frankly, your code base looks messy, and you're going to have a hard time getting anyone up to speed and actioning within your project at any time that's reasonable, making that lane change very difficult. And then this third point here is that technical debt really inhibits how investable you are. So let's say that it becomes a pattern, right? We're not able to fulfill and deliver things for our customers at the pace in which they're expecting, or we're not able to keep and attract top talent. Maybe you're not even able to have someone from another team in your organization willing to come over and jump in because they're aware of the technical debt that you've accrued. That's not going to be felt only by you and your working team. That's going to be seen and felt by others. When you're approaching your board come budget season, asking for an increase to really stick to your budget, or excuse me, stick to your roadmap while also taking care of your technical debt, that's going to be a really hard sell. They may not say, hey, we know that we're not willing to give you this funding because, or this budget because of technical debt, but it's what they're feeling. They're feeling your sluggishness, how slow you and your team are operating, and that becomes very difficult to be seen as investable and worthwhile. So what can be done to avoid this? We feel really strongly that the goal should be to support your engineering and delivery teams with principles that promote shared ownership and responsibility for that technical debt. And so one of the ways that we've done this really concretely is through the creation of our engineering tenants at Livefront. So if you look at this list, these are all the things that our team has said we're not willing to forgo any of these items in the pursuit of shipping something more quickly. And this is something that our team actually actively actively ensures is built into our process and taken care of with every single ticket that we even pick up and start. So really, to drive this home, we'll take a look at one just so you can really understand what I'm talking about. If we take a look at our engineering tenant accessibility, you'll see at Livefront, we really believe that equal access to digital products is essential. So really, what does it boil down to? It boils down to us ensuring that we are supporting the widest possible audience with every feature and function that we put into any of the products that we work on. And this is not just to do right by our users, which is very important. Take that home, stash that away. But it's also to ensure that we aren't accruing technical debt in areas that you might see here in like this example. Not going to call names, but I'm sorry, I couldn't remove Costco from our example. So we're going to take a look at Costco really quick. I'm sorry if I'm throwing anyone under the bus. But you can assume that one of the main features, functions, key tasks that I might want to perform as a user is to upgrade my membership. Everyone wants the black executive card, right? I don't want to be seen with my white card with the yellow star. I'll admit that's what I have. So let's say that I open the app here, and I want to go upgrade my membership. You could do that here. You could navigate using that bottom navigation menu and discover a tile that looks like this, where presumably I can pretty simply upgrade my membership. Now that works pretty simply for me, someone who's fully sighted. However, if I have limited vision, I might be using something else. The native screen reader functionality built into your phone. Now, with VoiceOver enabled, what you would expect is that you'd be able to navigate any app on your device, and your phone is going to be announcing what is on the screen. It's going to tell you what you'd be able to read, how you'd be able to interact with it, and what the function you might be able to perform if you were to continue with it. So in this example, if I turned VoiceOver on, what I would hope to see, or hope to hear, is something like this. As I select this tile, you'd hear it announce membership. Button, select to manage your membership, telling you what is on the screen, that it's interactable, and what you can expect to do with it. But in reality, this is what you hear. I really like that. This team accepted some technical debt. This person who wants to pay you more money is not going to be able to, because this team accrued technical debt. Now, really, moving forward with that, the issue here is that this will get presented to someone, right? Maybe someone in this room, and again, I'm sorry if I'm throwing someone under the bus. But the team may have to forego what's on their roadmap for this quarter and spend time auditing things, going back, rebuilding buttons, ensuring that accessibility traits and labels are set properly so that people are not dead-ended in situations like this. And if this isn't convincing enough to ensure that you're not accruing technical debt and you're doing right by your users, know that this is going to be a mandate that slowly gets passed down and coming to you from the courts. So just be aware that this is really important. If you take nothing away, go back and institute some accessibility labels. So that's lesson number 4. When it comes to technical debt, practice frugality. We'll move on to number 5. And this is understand the implications of your technology choices. Now, again, product folks in the room, there are often times where you are approached with technical questions that might feel out of your wheelhouse. But you aren't supposed to shy away from scenarios like that. You should be involved with questions like this. Should it be a native or cross-platform app? You should be involved in discussions talking about, hey, it looks like this library has the feature that we need. Should we just pull that in directly and roll with it? Or this third one here that's saying that, our vendor has an API for that. Should the app just call it directly? Now, these seem like highly technical questions in topic areas, and a lot of product people will retreat and say, let's talk to our engineering lead to figure that one out. But you shouldn't be retreating. You need to know why people are coming to the conclusions that they are, and really what's most important is for you to ensure that the decision, the conclusion your team is coming to is future-proof. So naturally you ask, how do we know if something is future-proof? We can't tell the future. These are some topic areas, some things to think about in scenarios where you are a part of a technical discussion that might have further implications down the line. So we'll take a look at the first one here, get to know your platform. So especially in mobile, whether you want to believe it or not, to some extent, Apple and Google are developing things for you and your development teams to use to make your products better. Again, choose to believe that or not. But there are things being extended to you, different APIs and functionality that your team can tap into to promote the best possible experience for your users. And when it comes to thinking about technical questions, you need to understand, well, down the line, maybe we're building an AR app, And having close and tight functionality with the camera and the LiDAR function is really important to us. Will the decision we make today, maybe on what type of app we build, allow us to continually receive those updates as they become available to the public? Or will we be kind of waiting in the wings until those things trickle down to us with this decision? Very important just to get to know Apple and iOS ecosystems really deeply and all the functionality it's being provided and offered to you. The second is plan for the end. Melodramatic, but we'll get through it. It makes sense. Another common question that we saw before is like, hey, there's this library. Should we just pull it in? It seems to, quote unquote, come for free. Well, you may be able to deliver something more quickly. You have to think about what happens if that project ends. People stop deciding to contribute to it. The company that you've been relying on to keep us up to date with the ever-evolving ecosystem just decides it's not a priority for them anymore. You need to be willing to accept that as your own code, as you and your team pull it into your project, and make sure that you are equipped and willing to continue developing that if the end for that party were to come. Building on that as well, you need to insulate your core. Another poor joke, I'm sure everyone is already filled with an office of like a lot of puffy vests. It's not where we're going with this. It's to think about your most important features and ensure that those are protected. For example, if we were to build an app that relies heavily on taking in events that happen in your mobile app and reminding users with push notifications, management of push notifications and the entire lifecycle can be very, very difficult. So it may actually be warranted to bring in a vendor. However, if we're firing all of our events straight from our app directly to our vendor using just their API, things will work, but we're leaving ourselves exposed. We're not insulated. What happens if that vendor gets slapped with a lawsuit and decides that their attention has to be diverted elsewhere and that product wanes? You're now at the exposure of what's happening to that other company. So maybe a better solution, because you were here today, is that you think about, rather than having your mobile app connect directly with that vendor through their API, building an intermediate layer. Have it talk to your backend and pass along the things that are important. So if that demise were to come, it makes it easier for you to shift where you're sending your data and really support that end user experience the best you can. So that's lesson number 5, understand the implications of your technology choices. We'll move to 6, build feedback loops into every stage of development and launch. We really feel that a product's success hinges on the working team's ability to uncover issues, do so quickly, and ship releases as fast as possible. And so some of the ways that we've done that is really leaned into a staged release plan that Matt kind of foreshadowed a little bit before. As you can expect, we're often starting with rapid feature development. We're building up everything that's going to be within the product that we release to the public at someday. You're going to get to a point where it feels like everything we've got included is either checking those boxes on our MVP list, or at least we know it's providing some amount of value to our users. So when you get to this point, you have this kind of quote-unquote release candidate that kicks off a couple things: a set of confidence testing and running through our pre-flight checklist. And I'll touch on both really briefly. The notion of confidence testing is to take your working team and get that release candidate on their device. Use it like real users. You're test driving your product. This is the dog fooding approach. You're hoping to gain confidence as a team that the work that you've done is in a good spot and ready for prime time. At this same time, we like to kick off kind of an audit against our pre-flight checklist. Now, I won't go through that. We could probably spend an hour and a half talking about it, but it's really a list of our hard-earned lessons of what's unique about shipping a mobile product. Thinking about, we know that we have to submit some kind of legal surveys and forms to Apple and Google. We have to ensure that our dependencies, our secrets are not exposed if you could ship this product and sniff things out if you took a look at the code base. So we want to ensure that these are just procedural things that could slip through the cracks, and we're taking care of them as soon as possible. As your team feels confident and you've moved through auditing, you move to this alpha release phase, in which case you're not quite leaving the building yet. You're extending this product to people beyond your working team. If we were all in the company, I would be inviting you all to test drive this pre-released version of the product and give us feedback. You'd be providing them with different avenues and ways to communicate with you and check it out. Again, starting to build confidence even further. These are where the feedback loops are really obvious. You're going to start learning, hearing feedback from others, synthesizing, prioritizing any bugs that pop up, feeding your design team with any feedback that you're getting from now this extended set of users, and continuing development. Moving on to a closed beta release is the first time you're actually going to be introducing a pre-released product to real users. You're going to select those who are highly engaged, close to you, your power users, and invite them to that pre-released version and start to get feedback, understand if there's bugs, feed your design team, and move forward there. As you gain confidence, opening it up to a larger round of folks, again, expanding it, learning, feeding your design team, feeding your engineering team, and as you gain confidence, finally that public release. So there's a lot of steps here, but really what's important to realize is that the feedback loops and the mechanisms that you use should be tied to the stage that you are in. So thinking about some of these things that are maybe more apt during the design phases. User interviews to figure out what are those pain points, concept testing, you're forming theories and then testing those with users and seeing if they actually fulfill their needs, and then moving towards usability testing when you've narrowed in on that concept to make sure that the interactions are in a good spot. So for the interest of time, I'll keep moving through these. We can talk about the different ways we receive feedback from users after. Come catch us. There's so many that we can talk about. But really the important takeaway is that your feedback mechanisms should be tied to where you are within that development process and where you are within each of those individual loops. And that's lesson number 6.
All right. So our final lesson is bring your organization along for the ride, particularly in the context of your company has never launched a mobile app before. They're launching it for the first time. And we alluded to this before, but skillful communication about what to expect at what point along the way is really important. And I think this applies for any product team, not just mobile, but really what we all want is we want to be accountable, but we also want to be autonomous. You know, we want to be measured by the outcomes we produce, not the outputs that we churn out. And so how can we communicate with the rest of the organization in a way that supports that and maintains autonomy for our team so that, you know, we can focus on the how and we're aligned with the rest of the organization on the why and what. So three tips here. One is put the progress in their hand. One thing that we found as just an invaluable part of our process is this idea of weekly internal releases. So once the app reaches kind of a critical stage of where it's not anywhere close to complete, but there's enough there that a user can interact with, we want to get that in the hands of our team of stakeholders as soon as we can. And so this requires a little bit of process and tooling. You got to be set up to be able to just, you know, as a routine, once a week, we're going to mark our team's progress over the past week, and we're going to deliver a build internally to other stakeholders in the organization so that they can see a window into our progress and what our team is doing. This has yielded a lot of benefits. The main one is just that it gives people a window and visibility into the work that's being done. You know, how many times have, you know, as a product development team, you've been asked, hey, what % complete is it? How many like that question? You know, when you're distributing, we're putting the work in their hands. We're putting the progress in their hands. So you know, Sam, who's in the audience today, said, the weekly release is the status update once. I love that. It's rather than some abstract, you know, spreadsheet of saying, okay, this feature is 20% done, this feature is 70% done. Launch the app, take a look, swipe around, tap around, see what's there. Another benefit of this is that it gives, it conditions and trains the rest of the organization on what velocity, what volume of work can get done in what period of time. So it's a really indirect way of setting expectations so that you know, rather than trying to, you know, guess of some, you know, percentage completeness, it's in a really tangible way you're able to demonstrate what your team has accomplished in a given period of time. Also, to Jack's point of feedback loops, it's a great way for a designer to put the app in their hands and say, hey, I designed this interaction with a certain assumption in mind, and it looked great when it was a static comp in Figma, but now that I'm actually interacting with it on device, it just doesn't feel quite right, and I think there's an opportunity to improve that. So having these weekly releases, these dog fooding builds that get distributed to your internal team are a really invaluable feedback loop that you can use to refine your product along the way. Secondly, report on outcomes. For all the things that we talked about before with being oriented to outcomes and finding a North Star and focusing on the why and the what, you got to be worthy of getting that amount of space, right? And so if you align on a North Star and you align and agree with the executive team and the rest of the organization on what really matters, well then be accountable to that and report it back. Show the progress you're making against those North Star metrics. Third, celebrate your wins. We actually oftentimes see product teams deliver really important work and achieve amazing things, and then it's just like, okay, on to the next thing. But it's often overlooked, but really important to just take time to celebrate the wins that you collect along the way. Because oftentimes it just gets overlooked, and it creates a sense of participation from the rest of the organization, and really inspires that alignment between not just your kind of self-contained mobile product development team, but the rest of the broader organization. Okay, so we do have one bonus anti-lesson, and this is don't plan to spend $2 million of paid media the week of your launch. And this is speaking to a larger point of launch softly, launch progressively, like Jack described in that staged rollout plan. Especially if this is your very first mobile app, there's gonna be assumptions that were made that turn out to be incorrect. There's gonna be things that were overlooked in spite of all these efforts that we've taken to try and mitigate that as much as possible. And so we've worked on product launches before where it's like, no, we can't move the date because we have $2 million worth of ads that are going to be spraying the internet like that same week. And that's just putting the team in a bad position. Like, that's not going to yield the outcome that was desired. It's the best of intentions. It's great when you have a $2 million paid media budget. That shows an organizational commitment to your app, but time it and stage it in a way that really maximizes the intended result, and make sure that you really have a quality product that meets its promises and fulfills its value proposition to users before you get really loud about it. Okay, so our 7 lessons, just to recap. Draft a quarterback you trust, not Kirk Cousins. Relentlessly ask yourself, why should this product exist? Emphasize themes over features. When it comes to technical debt, practice frugality. Understand the implications of your technology choices. Build feedback loops into every stage. And then finally, bring your organization along for the ride. Be really skilled about communication on what your team's doing. And that is our 7 lessons. Thank you. We'd love to take any questions that you have, or as you probably can see, any one of the topics that we covered in these slides are worthy of an hour-long discussion itself. But let's go to the, yeah.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jay. I also work in the product space. This is regarding the first point you made regarding drafting a good quarterback. So I've noticed that a lot of products that are more stable do have regular release schedules, but some of the newer products, up-and-coming products that smaller companies are working on, especially if it's at the very early stages, they do have irregular release schedules. Sometimes they might have a hotfix to fix a bug 2 days after the previous release, and then if they're working on a next big feature, it might come 3 weeks later or 5, 7 weeks later. So my question regarding this is, how do you feel about some of the newer up-and-coming companies having irregular release schedules? Are you to say that these product guys are bad quarterbacks?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and definitely not. To your point about, for an immature product, a product that you're building for the first time, well, obviously you need to reach a critical mass of functionality before you're ready to publicly release that out into the world. But we would absolutely encourage every team to, at a minimum, ship an internal release on a weekly or bi-weekly cadence, whatever makes sense. And that yields the benefit of it's about training. It develops habits, and in order to even if you're not distributing more than 10 people, let's say, the mechanics and the machinery of being able to release your app every week, it's that set of actions isn't much different if you're distributing it to 10 people or 10 million people. So it really trains the team to get really good and really sound operationally at releasing. And then also to your point about sometimes you might just have a long-running feature, and it just doesn't make sense to ship it till it's really fully done. Or maybe it touches every corner of your app, and it's months long worth of development before it's ready to go. So one thing that we have found really effective is we really use feature flags very heavily. And so in that case, we have runtime feature flags that we build, and we just think of that as a part of feature development. And so that when we have those long-running features that are weeks or months of development, we can just disable that feature so that it can remain work in progress. The source code is still it's still there. It's not off on some side branch that's going to drift away. And then when we ship our app, it's there. It's just users can't interact with it. That allows us the flexibility to inevitably fix the little bugs, little quirks, accessibility fixes, design fidelity, things like that. That you can usually there's usually some level of just smallish improvements and bug fixes that are ready to go in a somewhat repeatable cadence. So using feature flags allow you to let those little fixes get out while you're still building your big feature. Is that helpful or any follow-up?
I want to ask about one of the points you made. So you said to have it's good to have an internal release at least at a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So I looked at your website and I saw that you guys do 7-day sprints. That's true, right?
Yeah, and we have weekly releases, but we don't practice like the kind of traditional Scrum like in a 7-day cycle. Like our actual process is more oriented to Kanban, where it's just continuous prioritization and throughput. But we do have these weekly releases as a marker for most of the products that we work on.
So a lot of tech companies actually go about 2-week sprints in an agile manner. So how would you feel about these tech companies going about releases? Because when you're working on a 2-week sprint, it's rather difficult to have a release at the end of each sprint, especially because 2-week sprints have more items, and sometimes a 1-week sprint isn't long enough for us to complete certain product development. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and whether it's 2 weeks or 1 week, I think that just depends on what works best for the team. But what we see as the larger point is that it is a cadence, it is reliable, it is predictable. It's not based on, hey, what we happen to have done at any given time. And so sometimes we release once every 3 months, sometimes we release once every 3 days.
Yeah, and I think I'd build on that and say that boring releases are still exciting in that you are continuing to practice your process. And I think that going through that and committing to some sort of deadline is going to help the product folks in the room because you're not going to arbitrarily set deadlines. You're going to say, okay, we're not quite ready for prime time. We went through testing. We're not confident in this feature. It's not slipping out months. Your team knows that we can get this into the next release that's predictable. And so those negotiations on deadlines become a lot easier when there's predictability in your schedule, even if a lot of those releases are very boring.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, if any come up, I think Jack and I are going to be hanging around, so feel free to stop by and fire away. But thanks all for joining. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully you found something useful from it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.